everybody. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist, and welcome back to my channel. Those of you here for the first time, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm also an author working on my first novel. And on my channel, we like to talk about the heart of writing, which in my mind is in the psychology of the characters. So we're going to dig into the psychology behind world building, behind characters, behind plot twists, behind tropes, all that stuff. So for today, we are continuing with my trope diagnosis series. And for the month of December, I've really been focusing on character origins. So today I thought I would tackle a very popular one, and that is the chosen one. Okay guys, so this is my third attempt recording this, so hopefully it works this time. So, the chosen one trope. Those of you who have been on my channel a while know this is not my favorite trope. In fact, it is probably one of my least favorite tropes. That being said, it's still possible to do it well. So we're going to kind of look at what I feel is usually done wrong with this trope and ways that you can maybe switch it around and make it more interesting. So first off, what is the chosen one trope? Chosen one trope in general is the idea of the main character usually being a prophesized hero or savior. That's the bare bones version of it anyway. And my main issue with this trope is that usually the chosen one becomes special just because they're the chosen one. And that's boring. Most of the time my issue with chosen one characters is that their personality is either bland or it's just not there at all. And that doesn't make for an engaging character. Now, a lot of times this is done purposely. It's done to essentially create, especially in young adult fiction, essentially an audience plug-in character where you can pretend that you are this main character going on all these adventures. And while that's a good idea in theory, I don't really think is executed well. Because most of the time these stories have lots of different angles, they have lots of different adventures, lots of different characters that you have to meet and interact with. And it's hard to do that with a character that doesn't really have much personality. So that, I think, is a major flaw in this trope, is that most of the time this chosen one is interesting only because they're the chosen one. Now, this is easy to fix. Just like with other characters, you try to give them flaws and faults and things like that. You want to do that with your chosen one character too. And I think that should be the first thing that you do with any character is, okay, what are their likes? What are their dislikes? What are they afraid of? What are they good at? What is their relationship with these other characters? Those are all things you should figure out and flesh out before you really start assigning roles to these characters. Because I think if we assign roles first, we tend to almost make them stereotypical. So if you start off with a character and you know they're going to be like the hero's sidekick, a lot of times they're snarky, they're kind of the sarcastic best friend, which isn't bad in and of itself. I mean, I have a character that has some of those traits. The problem is that most of the time authors stop at those traits and they don't develop it further. So that's an issue that is easy to fix. And I'll bring this up because I've seen it brought up in the fandom quite a bit, and I kind of agree with it. So I'll throw this out there. Spoilers for the last Harry Potter book if you haven't read it or if you haven't seen the movie. I personally feel that after Harry's death against Voldemort, that he should have stayed dead and Neville should have been revealed to be the real chosen one. I think that would have been a great twist. And I also think that Neville had a much more engaging past and a much more, honestly, more motivation. Again, that's just me. But this is an opinion I've seen repeated in the fandom quite a few times, so I'll mention it here. And again, that boils down to simply your chosen one, you don't ever want them to be the chosen one just because they're the chosen one. That's my other issue with this trope is most of the time the person who is the chosen one is the least qualified to be said savior. And even when you get other characters who are introduced who have far better skills or understanding, usually it still falls to the chosen one. And it usually doesn't make a lot of sense. That's another issue with this trope is if you want to make it interesting, I would love to have a story where the chosen one fits being the chosen one. A lot of times they're like this isolated individual from like a farm or somewhere. They're a nobody essentially, which I get what the author's going for. They're trying to do the nobody too small kind of thing, which I get. But the problem is most of the time their chosen one doesn't have the skills that you want said chosen one to have. And so I'd like to see a story that has a chosen one that has the skills you want a chosen one to have. Someone who's good at strategy, someone who has a position of power they can utilize, that kind of thing. I think that's a fun angle. The other angle that I like, that I will throw out there, is where you find out they're the chosen one after the adventure's over. Throughout the adventure, there is no chosen one, there is no destined one, there's nothing like that. And then at the very end, after everything has been done and all the adventures have been won, all that stuff, then you find out that the person who stepped up to the role was quote unquote destined to step up to the role. I don't dislike those quite as much because the key point is in the character's own motivation and own heart without any outside influence pushing them. Good example of this, Frodo from Lord of the Rings. He chooses to step up and take the responsibility of the ring onto himself. There is no prophecy that says it's going to be a hobbit. The only reason he does it is because his uncle Bilbo is too old and he feels like somebody has to. He does it because he thinks it's the right thing to do. Later on, Gandalf kind of loosely says maybe he was destined to get the ring. But they never really outright say that, yeah, it was destiny, it was fate, it was this or that. It was more a case of right place, right time kind of thing. So I personally like that a little better. Another point that I want to bring up, and this is one I think, I see this one more in movies than I do in books, but since they're in movies, I'm sure they're in books somewhere that I just haven't read. And that is the idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Now this is not just a fictional term, it is also a psychological term. This is something that we use in therapy to describe essentially when someone is told something over and over again and they essentially take it on themselves to almost become what they're told they're going to become. I'm going to give you guys an example of a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's easier to give an example than it is to explain it. So let's say we have a parent who has a child and they are constantly berating the child and telling them that they're going to grow up to be homeless, they're going to grow up to not have a job, things within that realm. When you're told that over and over again, you don't have high self-esteem. So usually when you don't have high self-esteem, your schoolwork and your hobbies and stuff falter, they suffer. So now said child is coming home with bad grades or difficulty behaving in school, which leads to more berating from the parent. And let's say said child wants an escape, so they turn to, say, drugs or alcohol. And that leads down another path that may lead to difficulty with employment. It may lead to difficulty maintaining a house or an apartment, and then they may end up on the streets. Again, I say may because there's tons of variables in here, but the idea essentially is that what you're told influences what you believe, and that influences your behavior, and then that essentially leads you to become what you've been told you'll become. Now, this is not a foolproof 100% always happens thing, not in the least. But it is something that I think is important to bring up when you're talking about prophecies and destiny, because that has a strong influence on people. Because if you're told from a very young age, hey, here's what you're prophesized to be, here's what you're prophesized to do, that's going to influence how you think, how you feel, how you interact with people, who you hang out with. It's going to have a strong impact on what you do. So that's why I bring up the self-fulfilling prophecy, because that might be something to take into account. So I want to see a self-fulfilling prophecy that's positive. Give me a positive self-fulfilling prophecy where someone is told from a very young age that, okay, maybe they can't do everything, but if they work hard and they have good friends and they depend on people who care about them, here's what's going to happen, and have that happen. I know it's not nearly as dramatic, but I think it would send a good message. So I'd like to see more of that in stories personally. So that really is just my overview of the chosen one trope. I don't think it's necessarily a bad trope. It's just not my favorite for reasons I've stated. But I do think there are ways to reinvent it and make it more interesting. Somebody brought up a while ago, what about a chosen one who's evil? That's an awesome idea. Let's follow a villain who is a chosen one, who is, instead of saving the world, their destiny is to destroy it. That's awesome. Or I've also heard of one, what if the chosen one is completely inept and the people get tired of it and they get rid of him? That's an idea too. There's a lot of different angles you can take with prophecy and destiny and things like that, because prophecy and destiny have a lot of room for loopholes. And loopholes can be a lot of fun in writing, as long as you keep them straight. That's sometimes my problem. I have to write down, anytime I'm going to reference destiny or histories or anything like that, I have to write it down so I keep it straight. But that can be a fun angle to take. So that's, like I said, my take on the chosen one trope. Thank you guys for chiming in. As always, make sure you leave any comments or suggestions below. I will get back to them as soon as I can. If you guys like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss when I upload. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next time.